Hello, anatomy and physiology students. My name is Julian De La Rosa. It's very nice to meet you if we have not met already. Going on in week 12, hope everyone's doing great. I think this week covers a lot of great material. The forearm muscles, super easy to remember in terms of origins and insertions. There's a lot more similarities than many people realize. Of course, many people need to know what the difference is between an origin and insertion is for muscle attachments. In general, when we're looking at major muscle groups, typical skeletal muscles that we see, we do see that these muscles are going to pull one point closer to another. However, you don't want both points moving at once. You want one point to be stationary and the other to move towards it. So this I like to say moving point A closer to B, right? Usually this is a typical straight line, and the origin is the stationary, while the insertion is what the muscle is going to attach to and what that muscle is going to pull. Great thing about the forearm muscles, even though there are multiple layers, superficial, intermediate, and the deep layers, most of these muscles are going to originate from the epicondyles or the supracondyles of the humerus. The most confusing thing is to determine whether these origin points are going to be lateral or medial of these condyles. What I like to look at your own hands. When we're talking about the forearm flexors, we do have our lovely pass-fail, or the pronator teres, the flexor carpi ulnaris, the palmaris longus, and the flexor carpi radialis. Looking at our wrist, we do have 4 possible motions. We have flexion, extension, adduction, and abduction. Now I want you to take a moment, look at either one of your hands, left or right, and I want you to flex your forearm as hard as you can. You're going to see that we have slight adduction and flexion in the wrist joint. We see that the hand is pulled towards the medial side of our forearm. In other words, it's actually getting pulled towards the medial epicondyle of the humerus. Once again, pulling point A closer to point B. Much like we did reverse, we see that if we did the extension, we see our fingers slightly deviate laterally towards that lateral epicondyle of the humerus. So what does that mean? If we're talking about origins and insertion points, we know that most of these flexor muscles are going to pull our hand, different parts of the hand out towards the medial epicondyle. It's pulling across and attaching to that nice condyle in the humerus. And then again, if we're looking at the back of the forearm, we know that these extensors are pulling the hand and the wrist towards the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, right? However, there is an exception for the brachioradialis and the extensor carpi radialis longus. These are longer muscles. These actually do cross the elbow joint, and they actually will attach to the supracondylar ridge, the lateral side, of course, because we're still having that lateral deviation. All right, now let's talk about insertion points. I think the insertion points are probably the most complicated, so let's talk with our flexor or anterior forearm. So when we're talking about flexion or extension, most of these muscles are going to pull on the metatarsals of our hand. When we're talking about metatarsals, we are excluding the thumb or the first digit. So really, most of the manipulations happen to 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're talking about the flexor carpi radialis. This is the more lateral bone of the two. So this is going to pull on the lateral side of the hand, or digit 2 and digit 3. These are the most lateral. So that's how we're going to get our abduction going outwards and our flexion. And it's closer to the radial side, so of course it's going to go to the more lateral digits. And then when we're looking at the flexor carpi ulnaris, this is the more medial bone of the forearm, so it's going to pull on the medial side of the hand, or the 5th metatarsal, the side of the pinky. So this is how we're going to get our adduction and our flexion. So when we're talking about the flexor digitorum, the superficialis, and the profundus, I always think profundus as profound, as how much control of the hands we have. So the profundus is actually going to go to the distal phalanges of each finger. So again, we're flexing all the digits here, so 1 through 5 are all included, and it's going to cause our phalange to flex. And then the superficialis doesn't have much control, so it's actually going to insert on the middle phalanges, and that's how we're going to get this right here. So now let's go to the posterior side of the forearm, or the extensor muscles. So very similar to our flexors, depending on which bone side that the muscles are deviating to is going to decide which side of the hand is going to be pulling for that extension and flexion. So let's talk about the extensor carpi radialis. Now for the extensor carpi radialis, there is a longus and a brevis. The longus is going to be more lateral, and the brevis is going to be more medial. L for long and lateral. So because the extensor carpi radialis longus is more lateral, it's going to be pulling the base of the second metacarpal bone, or towards the second digit, right? So that's just going to pull to down, and that's how we're going to get abduction and extension. Now the brevis, because it's more medial, is going to be pulling again on this third one. So like we did with the flexor carpi radialis, the extensor carpi is going to be pulling 2 and 3, however there's 2 different muscle bellies. And then extensor carpi ulnaris, more medial side, is going to be pulling the 5th metacarpal bone, or the pinky side. So this is how we get our adduction, because it's pulling from here, and this is how we're going to get our extension. Now the extensor digitorum, digits for all 5 digits, thumb included, is actually going to come up and span across all of these, so it's just going to pull here, and then continue for wrist extension. My wrist is getting tired. Camera died again. I'm sorry. Super fun stuff. Have any questions, feel free to email me. I love the muscles. This stuff's awesome. So here to help. Good luck with your studying. I'll see you guys next week.